I think it's a hallmark of the whole spirit of partnership that we talked about earlier. That while we worked with Bishop Kevin and his HIV/AIDS Commission in the South African Bishops' Conference for many years and supported his work, as times changed and moved on, that financial support ceased. But partnership continued. And Bishop Kevin has been a constant source of inspiration to all of us in Trócaire by his passion, his commitment, and the witness of his life. And we were so pleased that he accepted the invitation to be with us here today. And we asked him to sit and listen to what went on and to share with us his thoughts. And your response, I think, to what he said shows the wisdom of that decision by the organisers. And we really are indebted to you for your presence and for your words, Kevin. Thank you so much. And while we have celebrated 40 years of achievement and endeavour today, we were very conscious when setting the tone for this conference that it is about the future. I suppose the work we're all engaged in is of such a nature that we don't really have time to rest on our laurels. The demands are great, the needs are ever increasing, ever more complex, and we must be attentive to them. So we've said in terms of our underlying theme of our anniversary this year is not so much to show that Trócaire has had a worthy past, but we have a dynamic future. And that this conference is part of setting that future agenda for us. It will take us some time to actually digest all that has been said today. But I do take a few things from it initially. And one is that the basic principles that have underpinned our work have been reaffirmed time and time again by the speakers. And while the civil society organisations, the NGOs, are often now accused in international fora of being locked into some kind of 20th century time warp because they're going on about all those old things and not moving with the new way of let's get the private sector involved, and it's going to be about growth, and it's going to be about all the things that were tried before and never quite worked. And you have the right-wing governments who've come to power and trying to develop this new agenda. We must always go back to our roots and our basic principles, because they can be adapted to show the way to the future. And what I heard was every person has the right to a dignified life. It embraces but goes beyond human rights. And Bishop Duma this morning spoke beautifully about the other aspects of people's lives beyond just the social and the economic. We sometimes forget in this part of the world that we live in the most a-religious continent on the world. In my work and travelling, I'm always struck, be they Christian, Islamic, Hindu, Buddhist, how the spiritual side of people's lives is present when they meet, when they talk, when they discuss their problems. And I think Bishop Duma brought that out beautifully today. The second is that the earth's resources belong to everyone, and how far we are removed from that reality. As private deals struck by elites, political elites, economic elites, corporations who avoid taxes, money salted away into Swiss bank accounts as resources from many countries are sold on the market, none of which goes back to the citizens of those countries to help them build up their societies. We've heard criticism of aid not having worked and the need for a new model. And indeed, there is a need for a new model, but some of the basic things need to work, like that people should have the resources that are theirs and benefit from them. As one man said at a previous conference we had, Africa is not a poor continent, it's a rich continent populated by poor people. And they are poor because the systems keep them poor. We've learned that gender equality, women's rights are essential to any resolution of the issue of poverty and indeed hunger. And we are committed to keeping that at the heart of our work. And we heard from Frank LaRue this morning that people's participation is perhaps the right on which all the others can be built. Our 25th conference 15 years ago went by the title People, Power and Participation. And we were tempted to run this conference as People, Power and Participation Part 2. But we thought it just might be boring. But actually, that is essentially what it has been about. And Frank spoke so fluently 15 years ago as he did today on these issues. People are at the heart of their own development, and there is a key role for civil society, which I was delighted to hear the Taoiseach affirm today, because this is the theme of our campaign aimed at policymakers this Lent. Sustainable growth, climate change, all of this we heard this morning so well presented by our keynote speaker in both frightening and hopeful terms. And we made the decision 5 years ago, 6 years ago, to put that at the heart of our work, and we will now strengthen that as we go forward. And that global economic structures must be changed so that the poorest countries get more than an equal chance. So I find in my work in the international NGO environment in Concord and Europe and so on, that there is a real lack of leadership in today's world. That political leaders are simply ducking the important issues. How many climate conferences have we had where nothing has been resolved? The Rio de Janeiro Sustainable Development Conference, a wishy-washy paper that reaffirmed the 1990 commitments. Trade talks, the Doha round to give the developing world a fresh chance, abandoned to all intents and purposes. Summit meetings used to be things that happened once a year when leaders got together to sort out the big issues. We went through years of weekly summit meetings as heads of government from all over Europe came and couldn't make decisions to help get us out of the mess we were in. There is a real sense that there is no real political leadership in the world today. Are we really that hopeful that this September summit is going to produce the new paradigm, that new message? I don't think it will. And I think civil society has the responsibility and the opportunity and the challenge to give that leadership. If we just take our confidence in our hands and say, we know from our experience, from our engagement with the peoples of the South and North, working together, we know what is required, and we need to point the way. And I believe if we do it confidently and articulately, we will be listened to. Because it seems to me that those who are responsible for making decisions don't really know what they're about. And as Mohan Mudasinji said this morning, it's not new development models, there's no development model. And we can help to shape it. And on that basis, we as Trócaire, working with our fellow Catholic development agencies through SIDSE, are committed to develop a new development paradigm. That sounds like a tall order, and it is. But if we don't do it, who will? And there are others out there who are similarly looking for new models, new ways to do things. We seem to be just sleepwalking back into the financial system that brought ruin to the world. Where is the new thinking about how the financial system should work? We don't hear it, except from perhaps voices on the edge. The Commission for Justice and Peace in the Vatican with a fantastic paper on the world economy published 2 years ago. Rich in thought. Even Benedict's own encyclical on Truth in Love, or was it Love in Truth, where he spoke about the economy of communion, some of which has been exposed today at the various workshops we've had. That sense of gift, of gratuitousness that the Bishop spoke about this morning. There are new ways to do these things. Indeed, I was impressed when Pope Benedict said that we in the West can learn from the Sharia banking system, which is not based on endless interest rates and profiteering, but rather on a sharing of economy and sharing of finances and supporting of community. All those ideas are there, and we really should be the ones, I believe, at this time to create that new debate and put out those models that really will challenge our political leaders to make the decisions that they so often avoid. Let's not be afraid to think big. So we are committed to do that, as we are to continue in our work on human rights, promoting good government, and particularly local advocacy, as was also mentioned this morning. That the voices of the South will be heard in their own communities, in their own countries, and internationally. And it is a time for we in the international NGOs of the North to be taking a step backwards and allowing those new voices emerging from the South to really be the leaders coming into the future. This post-2015 agenda should really hear those voices louder and louder as we, who are in this privileged position, begin to fade. I think that is part of the new paradigm that we are moving into. Not that we don't have an important role to play, because the decisions still that will affect the economic and political relationships are still made in the north, and that is where we must be active and where our southern partners challenge us to be more active, more prophetic, more critical. So Trócaire will continue to do that work. We will be a voice. We are committed to advocacy, for putting ourselves out there, for taking our risks. And I just want to share with you one very, I suppose, precious moment I had 3 years ago. Our founder, director, Brian McKeown, was in the Blackrock Clinic and he was dying. He knew he was dying, but Brian didn't go easy, you know. He fought to the end, as he fought with everything. I visited him on a number of occasions, and what he said to me about his time in Trócaire was the thing of which he was most proud was that he persuaded the bishops and the board that 20% of Trócaire's revenues, core income, should be devoted to the work of raising awareness in Ireland through development education, advocacy and campaigning. And he thought that was his greatest achievement. And that money is still ring-fenced each year. And it's what set Trócaire apart and still does, to a certain extent, in terms of the scale of the funds we're prepared to put to that work, although we are delighted, of course, that this has become the work of the NGO sector generally. But it was his vision 40 years ago that nailed that down as what we do. And we won't let him down in the years ahead. So, I think today we've had great energy and hope generated in this room. I think we are prepared to harness that to inform our work as we go to the future. We will continue to operate inspired by the gospel, which has been enunciated today in so many different ways, and by Catholic social teaching. And we're delighted that we've had our two bishop visitors with us and Bishop Kirby to accompany us on this trip today. I'd like to finish with words from our new Pope, Pope Francis. I think this is also a sign of hope that we have a man who has clearly caught the imagination of the world by how he has presented himself in only a week, by all those small gestures he has done, eschewing the limousine, not wearing his gold pectoral cross, but sticking with the iron one he's worn all his life, his walking across to the Basilica and St. Mary Major's, and so on. Here is what he said about 2 years ago, long before he thought he'd be in the job he is today. We cannot truly respond to the challenge of eradicating poverty if the poor are the objects of paternalistic and charitable actions. Rather, they must be the subjects of the state and society that creates the conditions, that promotes and protects their rights, and allows them to build their own future. And that, I think, has been at the heart of what we've been talking about today. And so it is with those words and that new energy that now permeates our church that we will go forward to do what Trócaire has been set up to do, to work for a just world.